Welcome to the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for week ending October 13th, 2012. We begin with healthcare, where Secretary Claudia Groom-Duke apologizes for the inconvenience of no lab service at the Scarborough Regional Hospital and the announcement of inpatient services at the new hospital before Christmas.
The services at the hospital have been temporarily relocated to facilitate sanitization due to queries by the staff regarding the quality of air reaching that department. As a result, the Tobago Regional Health Authority has requested, as a precautionary measure, a complete health assessment of persons working in that department, including pulmonary testing and chest x-rays. Additionally, Kariri has been asked to conduct air quality assessments and to make recommendations accordingly in the interest of our staff, in the interest of their safety. We have also requested testing for quality assurance. Meanwhile, laboratory services are currently outsourced to the Tobago Lab and the Scarborough Lab to ensure that our clients continue to access our services with as little disruption as possible. And so we at the Division of Health and Social Services, we continue to strive for excellence in health and social services in Tobago. I want to touch briefly in terms of the laundry services because I've heard mentioned in the electronic media that the laundry was completed a couple months ago. I just want to let you know that my information from the Tobago Regional Health Authority is that the laundry is not yet completed. As a matter of fact, the handing over has not yet been done. One, and two, to let you know that there has been no procurement for management of the service. As a matter of fact, the procurement processes are ongoing as we speak. I just want to say that this seemed to be another of those mudslinging exercises where when you speak, the mud might stain somebody or something like that. But I think that we're really getting to the ridiculous now and to create problems in situations where that doesn't exist. I just want the media and the rest of Tobago to know that the procurement process is ongoing in terms of that. And of course, in terms of the laboratory and so on, we know that we are in the process of moving from the Scarborough Regional Hospital to the Scarborough General Hospital. As a matter of fact, the continued commissioning and decommissioning of the Scarborough Regional Hospital and the Scarborough General Hospital. And to say that we have been moving considerably since the partial commissioning in April last. And so the following services are currently located at the new hospital: the pharmacy, our outpatients clinic, the medical records, the x-ray, the mortuary, the cafeteria, quality department, including the occupational health and safety, the education department, and the purchasing department. And I must say that we have been waiting patiently for the completed commissioning of the hospital. I just want to remind us that we did say that it would take over 1 year to complete the commissioning of the hospital. Nonetheless, we will see our inpatients in the hospital long before Christmas. We will see our inpatients in the hospital. And so Tobago can really look forward to our patients moving in and transferring into the Scarborough General Hospital long before Christmas. Similarly, our primary health care services, the integration of our primary health care services to include the mainstreaming of programs such as the HIV/AIDS and substance abuse. I must say that we are in the process of expanding our clinical services that would treat with HIV/AIDS and other non-communicable diseases. So we are in the process of expanding what we know as the Health Promotion Clinic. As you know, this clinic is our best practice in Trinidad and Tobago. It is all over the region about this service that is provided. And so we, in the Division of Health and Social Services, we are heightening and expanding our clinical response to HIV/AIDS and mainstreaming this throughout our health services on the island. And so we will be expanding the services at all of our health centers in Tobago. In addition to this, we are expanding our clinical services in the health centers, and we will be expanding and extending the time in our walk-in clinics. As you know, our walk-in clinics are now located at Canaan Health Center, Scarborough Health Center, and Roxborough Health Center. And so we are moving our time from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And this should start sometime by the second week in November. And I think that this is something that we have been planning for some time. In addition to this, we are working on expanding the clinical services at Charlottesville and Speyside to make those two health centers walk-in clinics. And so we are working assiduously in terms of that, and to ensure that also our wellness program is located at Charlottesville.
We move now to finance, where Dr. Anselm London, in his response to the national budget, says Minister Hawaii needs to check his figures again, as Tobago is receiving less than its share of the budget.
If you listen very carefully to Minister Hawaii's statement, and if you read the statement itself, and I did both, you will recall the minister spoke of an allocation to Tobago amounting to $2.356 billion. And before I comment on that, let me say to remind you that Mr. Hawaii is a good friend of mine and a banker of significant repute. But I am afraid my good friend got it wrong. He got it absolutely wrong. In fact, the statement that he made to the House indicated a larger amount of money for Tobago than we will actually get. Let me say this again. When the House is called upon to vote, be it in the lower house or the upper house, this is what it votes on. That is why this is called the appropriation bill. It is not a statement about a vote on his statement. Now, when you check the appropriation bill and you check the estimates in here, the government of Trinidad and Tobago underestimated the amount owed to Tobago. According to his statement, the relative difference is $19.06 million. That is a lot of money that could be used in Tobago to do a lot of things. So what do we believe? Do we believe his exaggerated figure in his statement, or do we follow the law and go with this? And he has to explain. But the matter doesn't rest there. There's another big error in the budget that is going to cost Tobago a lot of money. The statement of the minister, given the way he defined a budget, and there are many definitions, but using his own definition, his statement spoke of a budget of $58.405 billion. And that's what everybody talks about. I'd like to suggest to him and to the public that that number is wrong. Because if you go back to the estimates themselves, Parliament is not going to take a vote on a statement. They take a vote on the estimates. And those estimates provide for a figure larger than he suggested, of $58.578 billion, a difference of $173 million. Now the consequences of all of this, the important consequences of it, one important consequence of it, is that the share of the budget that Tobago got, despite what people may say, is below the minimum. And the minister, we have written to him, it's 3.98%. And that represents over $22 million of money to Tobago that did not come. These are serious accounting errors in the budget. And I tell you, as long as I am secretary, we are not going to sit idly by and have this wool pulled over our eyes. The budget numbers are wrong. The statement that he made says one number, and the actual documents say another. And the Assembly will not be punished because of his mistakes. And we have written to him and said we want to meet at the earliest opportunity to correct this. Now, there are also some issues related to the budget that you may not be aware of. There's a further $3.7, I believe, billion in what is called the Infrastructure Development Fund. Tobago did not get a penny of that fund, and that is government spending. Another important area, and we may raise that little further, while Tobago got a shortfall in its budget for housing of $250 or so million, what you don't know is that housing in Trinidad is afforded not the $116 million you see in the development program. There is a further $574 million from the same infrastructure fund, of which Tobago did not get one red penny. So I do not know how the Division of Settlements is going to manage. But you see, we have to make this point about these missing money for Tobago in the context of what you heard in the House over the last several days by three people who said they somehow aligned to Tobago. You had first Mr. Anil Roberts, in one of the vilest and vulgar kinds of contributions I've heard from a parliamentarian in a very long time. And whether or not he likes Bolt or other related projects, no one has the right to try to assassinate the character of people. And what he did there was totally inappropriate and improper. But you see, he's led in all this by his friends here in Tobago. Because what he does, what Anil Roberts did, the member, he went from lie to lie. You see, when they were caught misleading the public about the money, the price of the land and how much square foot, once they get caught on that, they moved on, they changed the subject. Then they say it's for staff It's for farmers and not for staff. When that was explained to them, they changed the subject. They changed the subject again when they said, well, why didn't you use Friendship or the racetrack land? You can't build on land you own. And then they moved on. When you clarify that, they said, well, why do you need a 199-year lease? Well, let me just repeat on this last little point. Any reasonable person would understand that the arrangement provides the opportunity for the assembly at the end of 20 years to own its land and building. In fact, if you have money, after 3 years, you look at this every 3 years, you have money, you could buy out the deal. So I don't think it is a proper thing to be there throwing things and seeing what would stick and then trying to assassinate people's character. Mr. Roberts was wrong then, and I know that he will continue to be wrong on other things. But let me make a point here. It has to do with a legitimate question people ask about, the tender process and all that. What the Assembly did in all this, you take an unsolicited proposal made to you by a project proponent. The people didn't even come and say, we want a building to build agriculture. We say, we're going to look at this thing. Various divisions laid their claim. They say, well, if we're going to do it, it will be for me. And it is on that basis we ended up with a building that in all things considered is good for agriculture. So that is one. But again, you have the suggestion that somehow, in some strange sort of way, you did not do due diligence. They tell you about a tender process. Let me explain something to you. There's a gentleman in Scarborough who owns a building and wanted us to buy it from him, or lease it or rent it. How do you tender in that circumstance? There is no tender. But what you do is apply rules of value for money. Are you getting a good deal? And it is for that reason the Assembly went out to the experts out there, say, look at this for us. Is this value for money? And that is all that occurred. But yet, Mr. Roberts and others engage in this kind of nonsense. And every time you explain a point to them, they find some other specious point to bring up. But I guess that is the nature of life. Let me also say, in the context of the budget, I really want to say that we have two members of the House, who's the member for Tobago East and the member for Tobago West. And, the saga continues. When you don't want to address an issue, you divert attention. And I am absolutely disappointed in Mrs. Topping's performance and also the performance of Dr. Baker. Sometimes you wonder if these people are real Tobagonians. Because rather than go to the House and complain to the minister that the money for Tobago wrong, that the share of the overall budget is incorrect, you don't do that, but you spend your time in the House cussing Tobagonians. And I don't think that is right. I mean, to suggest that somehow our health and sanitary facilities here are described by some latrine in Hermitage, all of us are, we're flabbergasted. You do not go to Trinidad to disparage Tobago, telling us about some outhouse in Hermitage and what. And that is wrong. You are there to represent the interests of Tobago and not carry on with this kind of nonsense. Let me also say, again, the same applies to the Minister for Tobago Development. And I think the emphasis they place on things, that's misplaced emphasis. You are there to represent the interests of Tobago. And the first thing Dr. Baker should have done is apologize to us here in Tobago because his colleague made a mistake in the calculation to Tobago. But he didn't do that. Spend a whole set of time who they forget to lambaste and criticize and thing in Tobago. We're not in that. I would have liked him to talk about addressing the things noted by the Auditor General in his own division, in his own ministry. Address that. Genuine question. We would have hoped that the minister would have said something about support for Cove. And he's not doing that. The story about some growth pool somewhere in the northeast, probably to be financed by God knows whom, does not reflect the results of discussion with the Tobago House of Assembly. And I could go on into things in terms of what he says about nepotism. If that is the case, he should start looking at his own office. But I'm saying to you that what we should be focusing right now budgetarily is the fact that there are many, many instances. And I would have hoped that Mrs. Toppin and Dr. Baker would have come to Tobago's defense. Let me give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples. You put pressure on Mr. Adams, and rightly so, about what is going on in housing and settlements. Mr. Adams, the shortfall there is 90%. It's about $256 million. Where is he going to find the money now to do that? Let me point to something again. I already mentioned Cove. Cove has got no money, but we have to build the factory shells. That is what our representatives should be talking about. And this is something I want to make a point here that is going to go to the heart of some very important programs that affect people, ordinary people in Tobago. Take the so-called scholarship program. The allocation for the scholarship program, as we call it, to help young people with tertiary education is $200,000. What are we going, how many students can we help with that? 1, 2, 5 at most? And that is the circumstances what we face. So you have this imbalance now. You have these important things for people. Take the Golden Apple program. Mrs. Groomjuk applied for $3 million. She gets $300,000. How is she going to survive? Combine the scholarship situation with what is also going on with the threats to GATE. What are we going to tell our children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces about opportunities for education? We had a debate a couple of weeks ago stressing the importance of building human capital. That is what Dr. Baker and Mrs. Toppin should have talked about, rather than joining with Anil Roberts to condemn Tobago and making all kinds of nasty comments about people and whatnot. I want to tell you also that the same aquatic center that they complain about and say, well, why you want Bolt and whatnot to do that kind of work? That aquatic center in Bacalet, the Bacalet Aquatic Center, got minimal funding. I think must be about 200,000 or 300,000, 200,000. What aquatic center can you build in Bacalet or anywhere with $200,000? And I feel that these budgetary shortfalls that we have is what we should concentrate on and trying to build up the resources, and not this saga of innuendo and changing the subject and so on. They are reasonable people will understand why you have, and you know what is very interesting, I'm going to stop just now. You know, you talk about lease and lease back arrangements. Let me just tell you. There are 2 buildings in Port of Spain. I think it's the Industrial Court and the Ramlogan building. I forget where, the Attorney General's building. Those buildings were leased to NIPDEC to build. I think they just handed them back because they're finished paying. So a lease arrangement of the kind that the Assembly got into is par for the course. And if you have to query about something, query it, but do not in the process of doing so try to suggest that people in Tobago are all nincompoops who don't know very much, you know, country bumpkin sort of thing. And then when that fails, you try to assassinate people's character. And I think Mr. Dr. Baker and Mrs. Allen should, as a minimum, put Anil Roberts, who is their colleague, say, hey, listen, first and foremost, we are Tobagonians, we are good people, and you have no business saying these kinds of things.
Thanks for watching the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for week ending October 13, 2012. For the Department of Information, I am Sophie Guillaume.